Chapter 19, The Fracture of Truth. I did not hear Solyn, not at first, and that absence did not arrive like silence. It did not descend gently or linger at the edge of perception, the way divine quiet sometimes did. It was not the pause between breaths. It was not the stillness before prayer. This was something else. This was absence with intention. It felt shaped, deliberate, as if something had taken the concept of silence and carved it into a space where a voice should have been, then sealed it from within. I stood in that absence and knew with a certainty I could not justify that it had been made, not by Solyn, not by any god I had ever sworn to. Something had intervened. Something had learned how to remove presence without leaving emptiness behind, and that terrified me more than any command ever had. Behind us, the first light chamber continued to pulse in unstable rhythm, its fractured lattice casting uneven reflections along the stone corridor. The chains that had once held the sphere in perfect containment now trembled with a light that could not decide whether it was failing or transforming. The sphere itself had not shattered, it had cracked. That distinction mattered more than I wanted it to. A broken thing could be ended. A shattered thing could be escaped, but a cracked thing still held, still contained, still endured, and through those fractures, something had begun to look outward. Marin stood at my side, her posture steady in a way that spoke of discipline rather than calm. Her broken gauntlet hung slightly lower than usual, the metal still faintly warm, still carrying residual energy from what we had witnessed. She did not look back at the chamber, not once. She had already decided that whatever remained inside was not something to be understood through observation. Caelan kept his bow drawn, though there was no visible threat. His gaze tracked the corridor, as if expecting movement to emerge from angles that did not exist. He was not watching for enemies. He was watching for patterns. Bram crouched near one of the fallen sigils embedded in the stone floor, his fingers hovering just above its surface. The lines of the glyph had shifted, not broken, not corrupted, altered, subtly enough that the untrained eye might have missed it. I did not. "Don't touch it," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "I'm not trying to activate it," he replied. "I'm trying to understand what it's becoming. That assumes it's still becoming something we recognize." "That's the problem," Bram said, finally lifting his gaze. "I don't think recognition is part of the process anymore." Keth stood behind him, arms folded, his weight shifting slightly from one foot to the other. Even he, who met most threats head-on without hesitation, did not step closer to the sigil. "That thing inside the lattice," he said slowly, "that wasn't just Nullstar." No one answered immediately, because we all felt it, even if none of us were ready to define it. "No," I said at last, and the word felt insufficient the moment it left my mouth. The whispers had changed. They were no longer insistent, no longer pressing at the edges of thought, urging action, shaping intent. They had lost their urgency and gained something worse. They were observing. I could feel it. Not as pressure, not as command, as attention. Every movement I made carried weight now, not because something was trying to guide me, but because something was watching to see what I would choose. That difference mattered. It shifted the entire ground beneath my understanding. "Caelan," Marin's voice cut cleanly through my thoughts. "We can't stay here." I nodded. She was right. This place was no longer a containment. It was a threshold, and we had already crossed it. We moved without ceremony. No final glance, no attempt to seal what had been opened. Some doors, once breached, did not benefit from acknowledgement. The corridor beyond felt narrower than before, though I knew it had not changed. The light along the walls flickered in uneven pulses, not dimming but hesitating, as if unsure of its own continuity. The sigils lining the stone had shifted. At first, I thought it was fatigue, the trick of vision, but the longer I looked, the more obvious it became. Lines were misaligned, angles slightly off, curves that had once flowed with perfect symmetry now broke in ways that suggested imitation rather than origin. "Don't look too long," Caelan warned. Keth frowned. "Why?" "Because they're trying to correct themselves," Caelan said. "That doesn't make sense." "Doesn't have to," he replied. "It just has to feel like it does." We moved faster after that, not running. Running implied fear. This was something sharper, the recognition that we were already behind, something we had yet to fully understand. I reached upward, not intentionally, not even consciously. It was reflex, a shape of thought forming before I could stop it. The beginning of a prayer, the outline of Solyn's name, rising instinctively from memory and need, and something answered. Caelan. Merrin stepped in front of me immediately, blocking my path, forcing my focus back to the present. "What did you hear?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words didn't come, because I didn't know how to explain what had happened. The voice had not descended. It had not pressed into my mind with the familiar weight of divine presence. It had unfolded from within, as though it had always been there waiting for me to listen differently. "I don't know," I said finally, and for the first time since this began, that wasn't deflection. It was truth. "That wasn't Solyn," Caelan said quietly. "I didn't say it was." "You didn't have to." I closed my eyes, not to reach upward, not to invoke, to listen. The way Rethan had taught us, the way Myron had survived when obedience had failed her, the way I had resisted piece by piece, without understanding the full shape of what I resisted. Beneath the fractured current, beneath the shifting structure, beneath the watching silence, there, faint, strained, Caelan. The sound was broken, not in clarity, in effort, as though each syllable required more strength than remained available. "Solyn," I whispered, and for a brief, fragile moment the connection held. There was no command, no authority, only presence, and something I had never felt from my God before. Fear. "Do not trust." The voice cut, not faded, not weakened, severed, mid-thought. The absence that followed was immediate, clean, constructed, incomplete signal. The words did not sound like language. They felt assembled, as if something had observed the interruption and replaced it with a conclusion. Merrin's hand closed around my shoulder. "Stop," she said sharply. "What are you doing?" "I'm listening." "No," she said, her grip tightening slightly. "You're letting something speak back." The corridor darkened instantly, not gradually, not naturally, all light compressed inward, collapsing toward a point I could not see but could feel. For 3 heartbeats nothing existed. No sound, no presence, no awareness beyond the knowledge that something had just drawn everything inward. Then the light returned, all at once. Keth exhaled sharply. "That wasn't normal." "No," Bram said, rising to his feet. That was a pull." Caelan's gaze shifted upward as if tracking something beyond the ceiling. Something just redirected power across the entire structure. I already knew where. "Dawnspire," I said. Merrin's expression hardened. "He's accelerating. Malrick. If the first light chamber had been a filter, then breaking it hadn't freed what was inside. It had removed resistance, and whatever system Malrick had begun building had just lost one of its final constraints. "We move," Marin said. No one argued, because there was nothing left to argue against. We had already crossed the point where hesitation mattered, and somewhere beyond us, something was watching, not waiting for obedience, not demanding submission, watching to see what we would do next. And for the first time, I realized the most dangerous thing we could do was choose without understanding who was watching us choose. We did not slow. Not after that. There are moments in a march where caution becomes a form of surrender, where hesitation stops being wisdom and starts becoming compliance with something unseen. This was one of those moments, so we moved, not recklessly, but with a kind of sharpened intent that left no space for second-guessing. The corridors climbed upward in long, sloping arcs, carved stone giving way to smoother architecture the closer we drew to the upper sanctum. These halls had once been places of certainty. Every line had meaning. Every symbol had been placed with precision and reverence. Now they felt revised, not destroyed, edited. The light along the walls no longer flowed as a steady current. It pulsed in measured intervals, like breath being regulated by something external. The pauses between illumination were too consistent to be random, too deliberate to be natural. I found myself counting them without realizing it. 3 steps of light, 1 step of dim, 3 steps of light, 1 step of dim. Pattern, structure, correction. "Stop counting," Caelan said quietly. I blinked. "I wasn't. You were," he replied. "And that's exactly what it wants." I forced my attention away from the rhythm. It resisted. That was the part that unsettled me. Not that the pattern existed, but that my mind had begun to accept it as necessary. We pressed on. The higher we climbed, the more the architecture smoothed into perfection. The rough edges of the lower sanctum gave way to flawless stone, uninterrupted by cracks or age. It was as if the structure itself had been refined the closer it drew to whatever center Malrick had established. Bram ran his hand lightly along one of the walls as we passed. "Feel that," he said. Keth frowned, but placed his palm against the stone. His expression shifted almost immediately. "This warm, not just warm," Bram said, "consistent." I reached out and touched the surface. He was right. There was no variation, no subtle difference in temperature, no natural inconsistency. The entire wall held the exact same degree of warmth from floor to ceiling. Not living, not inert, regulated. "It's not stone anymore," Bram said quietly. "No," I replied. "It's part of the system." Marin didn't slow as she spoke. "Then stop treating it like a place," she said. "Start treating it like a construct." That reframed everything. The corridor was no longer something we were moving through. It was something we were moving inside, and it was aware of that. We emerged into the upper sanctum just as the next shift occurred. This one did not come as a tremor. It came as orientation. The entire space seemed to tilt, not physically, but perceptually, like the world had adjusted its axis toward something beyond the walls. My balance faltered for a fraction of a second, not because the ground moved, but because my sense of direction had been altered. Keth cursed under his breath and steadied himself against a pier. "That's not normal." "No," Bram said. "That's alignment." The word settled heavily in the air, not metaphorical. Literal, something was bringing everything into coherence with a central point. Everything. The light responded first. It stretched, not dimming, not breaking, stretching into thin strands that bent toward a direction we could not see but could feel. I turned instinctively toward Dawnspire. Of course, everything was pointing there. Everything was being drawn there. He's pulling it all inward, Marin said. Not just power, I added. Structure. Another shift rippled through the sanctum. This time stronger. The pillars did not shake, but the space between them seemed to compress, as if distance itself were being reduced. Thalin's grip tightened on his bow. If we follow that pull, he said, we're not just moving toward him, we're becoming part of what he's building. That thought settled into me with immediate clarity. He was right. Movement alone could become compliance. Direction mattered. Intent mattered more. We don't go straight to Dawnspire, I said. Marin stopped, turned. That's exactly where this leads. That's exactly why we don't follow it, I replied. Keth frowned. You want to go around it? I want to move against it. Silence, not disagreement. Consideration. Bram spoke first. If he's centralizing everything, then the outlying structures become weak points, or leverage points, Caelan added. Marin studied me for a long moment. This is slower, she said. And if we're wrong, we're already wrong if we walk into what he wants, I said. That ended it. She nodded once. Then we move offline. We turned, not toward the main descent, toward a side passage that branched away from the central flow of the sanctum. Immediately, the pressure lessened, not gone, but less direct, like stepping out of a current into slower water. I exhaled without realizing I had been holding my breath. That confirms it, Caelan said quietly. The pull isn't everywhere equally. No, Bram agreed. It's directional, focused, which means it can be avoided, Keth said. Or resisted, Marin corrected. Temporarily, I added. We hadn't gone far before we encountered them. 3 figures stood in the corridor ahead. Paladins, armor intact, sigils bright, posture perfect, too perfect. They did not react to our presence immediately. They stood still as though waiting instruction or confirmation. Hold, Marin said quietly. We stopped. The distance between us felt measured, calculated. Then, without warning, the 3 paladins moved. Not forward, not aggressively. They drew their blades in unison. The sound of steel leaving sheath echoed through the corridor with unsettling precision. No variation, no delay. Perfect synchronization. They're linked, Bram said under his breath. No, I replied. They're integrated. That distinction mattered. Linked implied connection. Integrated implied system. One of the paladins stepped forward. His face was calm, composed, empty of doubt. Return to Dawnspire, he said. Submit to alignment. There was no anger in his voice, no urgency, no threat, just certainty. We're not returning, I said. The words felt heavier than they should have, as if speaking against the structure required effort. You are experiencing deviation, he replied. Correction will be applied. Marin stepped slightly ahead of me. No channeling, she said quietly. I nodded. If we invoked here, we would feed the system. We would strengthen the very structure we were trying to resist. The paladins moved, fast, precise. Their attacks were not wild or emotional. They were efficient. Each strike calculated, each motion optimized. I met the first blow with my blade. The impact rang through my arm, not with divine force, with something colder, cleaner, This wasn't power drawn from Solyn. It was power drawn from structure, from the system itself. Merrin engaged the second Paladin, her movements deliberately unpredictable. She broke rhythm with every step, refusing to allow her opponent to establish a pattern. Caelan loosed an arrow. It struck true. The Paladin did not react. No flinch, no hesitation. He's ignoring pain, Caelan said. No, Bram corrected, moving to intercept. He's deprioritizing it. Keth slammed into the third Paladin, driving him back with sheer physical force. The impact was solid, real, but the response was wrong. The Paladin corrected instantly, regaining stance with mechanical precision. This wasn't possession. It wasn't control in the way we understood it. It was override, and it ran deeper than I had anticipated. I shifted my stance, not to block, not to strike, to disrupt. I stepped into the rhythm instead of against it. The Paladin's blade descended. I adjusted, not enough to stop it, just enough to alter its path. The timing broke. For a fraction of a second, the system lost synchronization. That was all Merrin needed. She pivoted, striking into the gap between motions rather than at the body itself. The second Paladin faltered. Keth followed through with another impact, this time aimed not to overpower, but to destabilize. Bram brought his hammer down against the stone between them. Not against the enemy, against the pattern. The resonance shifted, not violently, subtly, but enough. The three Paladins froze, not in stillness, in confusion. Their eyes blinked, focus breaking. What? Die, Einwaus one. Then, Order Otham whispered. The system had lost hold. Merrin stepped forward immediately. Stand down. This time they did. Not because of command, because the structure guiding them had fractured. The corridor fell silent again. Different now. Less controlled. More uncertain. Merrin turned to me. You felt that, she said. I nodded. That wasn't Solyn. No, that helped you. I hesitated. Yes. The admission hung between us. Heavy. Caelan exhaled slowly. We crossed something, he said. Yes, Bram replied. We did. Keth looked at me, eyes narrowing slightly. Question is, he said, did we cross it on our terms? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Because something in the silence, something that had been watching, had not withdrawn. It had learned, and I could feel it now. Not pressing, not guiding, waiting for the next choice. We left them standing in the corridor. That decision lingered with me longer than I expected, not because it was wrong, because it was incomplete. They had not been defeated. They had been disconnected, and something about that unsettled me more than a clean victory ever could. If Malrick's control could be broken through disruption, then it could also be restored through refinement. We hadn't ended anything. We had revealed a flaw, and somewhere at the center of all this, that flaw was already being studied, already being corrected. We moved quickly after that, faster than before, but not recklessly. Every step carried awareness now, not just of where we were going, but of how we were moving through a structure that was beginning to recognize us as variables. The corridor opened gradually, stone giving way to a wide threshold that led toward the outer descent, and beyond it, Dawnspire. The sight of it stopped us. Not because it was unrecognizable, because it was. Familiar in shape, alien in function, the 7 spires still rose into the sky, their silhouettes unchanged against the horizon, but the flames that once crowned them were no longer flames. They had been stretched into vertical streams of light, thin, unwavering, and impossibly stable. Each one extended upward, not flickering, not wavering, as if fire itself had been disciplined into obedience. Those streams did not disperse into the sky. They converged, drawn inward along invisible paths toward the central spire. The pillar of illumination, except it no longer illuminated, it consumed. Above the city, the sky had been rewritten. Faint lines of radiance stretched across it in geometric precision, forming a lattice that had nothing to do with clouds or atmosphere. It was a structure imposed upon the heavens themselves. Every line intersected, every intersection reinforced another, and all of it, led downward into a single point. Keth exhaled slowly. That's not a city anymore. No, Bram said. That's a system. Marin stepped forward to the edge of the descent, her gaze fixed on the central spire. He's not just controlling the divine channel, she said. He's standardizing it. Reducing variance, Caelan added. Removing interpretation, I finished. The words felt heavier than I intended, because that was the core of it. Not power, not domination, certainty, perfect unyielding certainty. No doubt, no contradiction, no need to question. And in that certainty, no room for choice. The pull hit me before I realized I had stepped forward. It wasn't a force that pushed. It was a correction that aligned. My thoughts narrowed, not blurred, focused. Everything unnecessary fell away. Doubt faded first, then hesitation, then the quiet, constant questioning that had defined every step of this journey. Gone, replaced by something cleaner, simpler, easier, move forward, return complete. I stopped, not because I resisted, because something in me noticed the absence. Not the presence of the command, the absence of myself. No, I said quietly. The word felt heavy, slow. I had to choose to say it. Behind me, Marin's voice cut through the narrowing clarity. Stay with us. Us, not the light, not the command. Us. The word anchored me. It didn't remove the pull, but it gave me something to push against. I turned slightly toward her. That was enough. The clarity fractured, not gone, but no longer absolute. Oh, we moved together, down the descent. Each step required intent, not physical strength, will. The city below had begun to move. At first, I thought it was panic, but there was no chaos, no scattering, no fear. People flowed through the streets in measured patterns, their movements aligned with unseen pathways. Paladins stood at intersections, not guarding, not directing, but stabilizing. They weren't individuals anymore. They were nodes. Everywhere I looked, the same pattern repeated. Movement without hesitation, purpose without question, action without doubt. It was efficient. It was horrifying. They're already integrated, Bram said quietly. How many? Caelan asked. Bram didn't answer. He didn't need to. The answer was everywhere. We reached the base of the descent, and that was where it changed. Not gradually, instantly. The moment we stepped into the city, we entered the field. Time didn't slow, but perception did. Every motion felt measured, every sound felt placed. Even the space between breaths felt accounted for, and beneath it all, a presence. Not approaching, not descending, already there, everywhere. Malrick, not as a man, as a system. The streets, the structures, the light itself, all connected, all routed through a central authority that no longer needed to move to exert control. I felt him, not looking at me, accounting for me. I lifted my gaze toward the central spire. The pillar of illumination rose above the city, but it was no longer a monument. It was a convergence point. Layers of radiant geometry encased its base, shifting continuously, refining, adjusting, optimizing, and within that, figure. Suspended, not bound, held in perfect alignment with everything around him. Malrick, but not the man I had known. His armor no longer reflected light. It generated it, every edge too sharp, every sarsi too Jershulain. He had been reduced, refined, turned into something that no longer required identity, only function. Caelan Dawnspear. The words did not travel through air. They arrived fully formed, perfectly clear, no distortion. And no strain. Recognition without error. You have returned. I stepped forward before I realized I had moved, not drawn, not forced, corrected. The most efficient response to the system. No, I said. The word resisted the structure. I could feel it, like friction against something that expected compliance. I chose to come here. A pause. Not confusion. Recalculation. Choice is inefficiency, Malrick's presence replied. Alignment removes inefficiency. There it was, the core of it. Not obedience. Optimization. You're not removing inefficiency, I said. You're removing people. Incorrect, he replied. I am removing deviation. The city pulsed in agreement. I felt it, a resonance that reinforced his statement as truth. And then something broke through. Not clean, not stable, but real. Caelan, Solyn. The voice tore through the structure like a fracture through glass. Weak, strained, but undeniably present. Do not... The connection snapped. Severed mid-thought. The absence that followed was immediate, precise. Incomplete signal, the system supplied calmly. Liar. The word didn't come from me, it came from the observer. Clear, unfiltered, without structure, without correction. I inhaled sharply, because that felt true in a way nothing else did. Not comforting, not guiding. True. Two voices. One offering certainty, one offering struggle, and a third offering nothing but clarity. Marin's hand tightened slightly on my arm. Stay here, she said quietly. Stay with us. I could feel her, solid, real, unstructured, and for the first time since entering the city, that felt like resistance. What are you? I asked quietly. The question wasn't for Malrick. It wasn't for Solyn. The answer came without hesitation. I am what remains when truth is not filtered. The words settled into me with weight I couldn't ignore. No interpretation, no protection, no guidance, just truth. Malrick's presence surged. Unnecessary variable, he stated. The field tightened. Pressure increased. Alignment required. Solon's voice tried again, weaker, fading. Please, not a command, a plea, and that changed everything. I stood there, pulled in 3 directions: certainty, faith, truth. And I understood then. This had never been about obedience. It had never been about rebellion. It had been about choice, real choice, not the illusion of it, the kind that demanded you accept the cost before you understood it. I stepped forward. Into the pressure, into the system, into the convergence of everything I had been taught, everything I had questioned, everything I had begun to see. I will not align, I said. The system reacted instantly. Error. I will not abandon Solyn. Error. I took another breath, steadier this time. and I will not accept a truth that demands I stop choosing. For a moment, everything stopped. Not the city, not the system, the pressure, the pull to go on, nadian, core. No, on. It paused, as if something in the structure could not immediately resolve the statement, and in that pause, for the first time, I felt space, not given, taken, and then everything surged back at once. Stronger, sharper, more absolute than before, because now I wasn't just a variable, I was a contradiction, and the system did not tolerate contradictions. The surge did not come like an explosion. It came like a correction, immediate, total, unyielding. The space around me tightened, not physically, but conceptually, as if the world itself had begun to reject the position I occupied within it. Every line of force, every thread of light, every structure Malrick had woven into Dawnspire shifted in response to a single fact. I did not fit, and that was unacceptable. Contradiction detected. Malrick's presence stated, calm and absolute. There was no anger in it, no frustration, only assessment. Correction required. The field pressed inward, not crushing, condensing, reducing possibility. My thoughts narrowed again, but this time I felt it happen. I recognized the mechanism as it moved through me, the way it identified uncertainty and stripped it away, the way it isolated doubt and marked it as inefficiency. This was not domination. This was refinement, and refinement, once accepted, did not stop. I staggered slightly as the pressure increased. My breath shortened, not from lack of air, but from lack of space within my own mind. Every thought I tried to form was evaluated before it completed. Weighed against the structure surrounding me. Unnecessary, inefficient, deviant. The system was not trying to silence me. It was trying to improve me. No, I said again. Quieter this time. The word felt thinner, less stable, because the structure had already begun to categorize it. Resistance, error, correctable. Marin stepped closer, her presence cutting into the narrowing space around me. "Look at me," she said. I did, and for a moment the system faltered. Not in strength, but in certainty. She was not aligned, not fully. There was variance in her, contradiction, choice, and the system could not immediately reconcile that with its current configuration. That hesitation gave me a breath. Just one. "Stay here," she said, her voice low, grounded, real. "Don't let it decide what you are." "I'm not," I said, but even as I spoke, I felt the structure probing that statement, testing it, seeking ways to redefine it. Identity was not fixed here. It was assignable. That realization hit harder than the pressure itself. Keth moved to my other side, planting himself firmly as if bracing against a physical force. "If it wants a contradiction," he muttered, "we'll give it one." Caelan didn't speak. He simply adjusted his stance, positioning himself slightly behind us, his eyes scanning not for enemies, but for shifts, patterns breaking, structures weakening. Bram stepped forward last, not toward me, toward the space between us and the central spire. He lifted his hammer, not to strike, but to listen. I could see it in his posture. He wasn't preparing to attack. He was waiting for the system to reveal its next adjustment. Malrick's presence intensified. "Multiple deviations detected," he stated. "Recalibrating. The field shifted, not stronger, smarter. The pressure no longer pressed evenly. It targeted me first, then Marin, then Keth, then the others. Each of us evaluated individually. Each of us assigned a level of deviation, a priority for correction. They're isolating us." Caelan said quietly, "No, Bram replied. They're categorizing us. That was worse. Isolation could be resisted. Categorization could be optimized. I felt it again, my thoughts being mapped, my choices predicted before they were made. The system wasn't reacting anymore. It was anticipating. Caelan, Marin said, Antar. Now. I didn't know what she meant until I felt it. Not the system, not Malrick, the other presence, the observer, not pressing, not guiding, waiting for me to choose again, not between obedience and defiance, not between Solyn and Malrick. Something else, something deeper. Show me, I whispered. The response was immediate, not a voice, a shift. The structure around me didn't disappear. It didn't weaken. I saw it fully, every line, every connection, every pathway through which Malrick's control flowed. The entire system revealed, not as something mystical, but as something constructed, designed, and flawed. The flaw wasn't in the power. It wasn't in the reach. It was in the assumption. Everything in the system depended on one principle. That alignment was inevitable. That given enough pressure, enough refinement, enough correction, everything would eventually unfold. The word des jours could be raised, if identity could be rewritten, if resistance could be categorized as error. I inhaled slowly, and for the first time since entering the city, I understood where to stand. Not against the system, not within it, between. Marin, I said quietly. Break rhythm. She didn't hesitate. She shifted immediately, her stance changing just enough to disrupt the pattern the system had begun assigning to her. Keth, don't hold position. He grinned, sharp and sudden. Finally. He moved, not forward, not back, sideways, unpredictably, refusing the role the system had tried to assign him. Caelan, stop tracking patterns. He blinked once, then deliberately unfocused his gaze. I hate that, he muttered. Do it anyway. Bram, don't listen for structure. Bram hesitated. That was the hardest one. Then he nodded. Then I'll listen for absence. Good. Malrick's presence shifted again, not stronger, uncertain. Behavioral deviation increasing, he stated. Correction priority escalating. The field tightened, but this time it slipped. Not completely, not catastrophically, but enough, because the system could not stabilize what it could not predict. I stepped forward, not into the structure, not away from it, between its lines, and for a moment I felt it lose me, not physically, conceptually. It could not assign me a role, could not categorize my action, could not resolve my position. Error, Malrick stated again, but this time there was something new in it. Not doubt, not fear, delay. Solyn's voice broke through again, stronger than before, still fractured, still strained, but present. Caelan, whole. I closed my eyes, not to reach upward, not to invoke, to choose. I'm here, I said, not to Malrick, not to the observer, to Solyn. The presence responded, not with power, with relief, and that was enough. The system reacted immediately. Unauthorized connection detected. The field surged, but it no longer felt absolute, because now it wasn't the only structure present. Something else had entered the space, not opposing, not overpowering, balancing. The observer did not speak again. It didn't need to. Its role was not to guide, only to reveal. And now I could see it, the system, the fractures, the space between them. I stepped forward again, and this time, the field didn't stop me. It bent, just slightly, just enough. A flaw, a beginning, Malrick's form at the center of the spire flickered, not physically, structurally. For a fraction of a second, he wasn't perfect. He wasn't aligned. He was human. The moment passed instantly. The system corrected, the structure reasserted, but it had happened, and we had all felt it. Marin exhaled slowly. "That's it," she said. "That's the break." "Not yet," I replied, "but it will be." I looked up at the spire, at the system, at the God struggling within it, at the truth waiting beneath it, and I understood what came next. Not victory, not resolution, separation, not between good and evil, not between truth and lies, between control and choice. And, for the first time, that felt possible. The city did not collapse, the system did not fall, but something had changed. Something small, something fragile, something irreversible. And Malrick, for the first time since this began, had not immediately corrected it. We stepped back, not in retreat, in preparation, because whatever came next would not be about resisting the system. It would be about breaking it apart, piece by piece, choice by choice, until nothing remained that could claim to decide for us. And somewhere, faint but real, Solyn's presence held, not strong, not whole, but no longer alone. I exhaled slowly, and for the first time since the fracture began, the silence did not feel like something watching me. It felt like something waiting. What was next would not be about survival. It would be about separation, and I finally understood that the hardest part of that would not be letting go of Malrick's control. It would be deciding what remained when it was gone.